Okay. Well, hello. My name is Craig Sachs. I'm with the Juneau County University of Wisconsin Extension Service in Mauston, Wisconsin. We're here today with the Mauston landscaping class, and we're going to talk about maintaining lawn and garden tools. So, to give you a little bit of background, this whole presentation, this whole material started because back in 1976, there was a nice publication put together called Caring and Sharpening of Lawn and Garden Tools, which I used regularly as I was an ag teacher back in the 80s. Used it a lot. When I came to Extension, that particular publication wasn't redone. So I kept asking people, when's that going to get redone? Well, I became the creator of that. So there is now a new publication called Maintaining Lawn and Garden Tools. And I think you all have been given a copy of that, or will get a copy of that. This is a nice summary of how to take care of your garden tools. If you're at all curious, this is a farm shop book from 1960. My father taught high school ag. If you really want to know about tools, or blacksmithing for that matter, you got to go older than 1960, or look for books older than 1960. If you page through a book like this, you find all kinds of really cool things on how to take care of old tools, hand tools, how to sharpen things that you wouldn't normally need to sharpen, as I said, blacksmithing. So that's where you find a lot of these sources. If you're curious about newer materials, there are books out like this one called the Tool Book that gives you, they just have pictures and pictures and pictures of different tools. You'd be amazed at how many different types of tools there are out there, for lawn and for garden, for everything else. And what you're seeing behind you is a collection of tools that I've pulled together over the years. So I'm going to say these are my preference tools. These are the tools I like to use. But you probably have other preferences, and you'll find that your parents might have other preferences, or other people are going to say, I prefer this over that. I understand. So today I'm going to show you some of my preferences. I laid out some things here later. You can take a look at it, just to point out that these are all sources of companies and supply catalogs that sell tools. Now, you can go to the local hardware store, you can go to the local big box store, and you can find tools. What they're going to sell you is the tool that everybody needs. They're not going to sell you some of these cool tools because they can't sell enough of them to make it worth having it on the shelf. So some of these, what I'll call cool tools, you're going to find in catalogs like this. Okay? So let's take a look at that. Let's first start about how do we choose the right tool? What are you looking for when you're choosing the right tool? Well, first of all, we want to think about how that tool was built. So when we look at this hoe, this is called a tang and ferrule hoe. This is one of those tools I suppose everybody has to have. The common statement with a garden hoe like this is it works for just about everything, but it's never right for anything. But then again, we all have to have this tool in the shop. This is a cheap tool to make. They just take a piece of steel and they jab it into the wood and they put this ferrule over the top of it to hold it in place. But of course, after you used it for a while, what happens? It gets loose, doesn't it? And it gets wobbly. So it's not designed to last forever. So that's a good tool to start with. You'll notice that this particular tool, this is one of the first tools I bought 30 some years ago when I first started gardening. I do not use this tool on a regular basis. Therefore, it's gotten kind of rusty over the years. But I do use it for planting my garden. So you'll notice I've notched different marks, 6-inch increments and 27-inch rows is the width of my rows. So when I'm marking out my vegetable garden, I have those measurements right at hand, and I use it for that tool. So it has a place in my garden. So that tool works for me. But what other tools are there? When we're considering tools, what other things to look for? You see this particular tool is attached, bolted right on there. It's secure. It's a forged front, so it's going to stay together. It's going to hold its own. If you look at this particular tool, same thing. You see how it isn't going to be loose like this one and wobble around over time. It's bolted right onto that wood handle. If you look at this particular shovel, you see that most shovels are just stuck onto that wood, but this particular shovel has a little extra to hold it in place, and they make all different designs like this, but I just brought this one out to show you as an example. When we look at handles, what do you want for a handle? You notice that I borrowed this from your greenhouse, and this one as well. So if you remove those, you'll see most of the tools I prefer are wood. I prefer the wood-handled tools. I think they're more comfortable. I think they have the right kind of feel for me. But certainly, you could have fiberglass handles. They're going to feel a little hollow, but they're going to last a long time. So they'll take the abuse. If you're going to treat them with a little bit of abuse, they're going to last a little longer. You could also have a steel handle. And of course that's going to clang every time you use it, but it's going to be sturdy. It's going to be heavier too. This is a heavier tool because it's made out of steel. You could take and put something over the wood handle. This is a nice foam piece that, again, out of your greenhouse. That's nice to have that extra foam piece. I've heard of people talk about ergonomics when this foam is designed for a nice reach, so if you're elderly, you can get a good grip on this, so a bigger piece of foam so you don't have problems with your knuckles. Now maybe some of you here wouldn't have that problem, but others might. This particular last piece I've got is wood that's painted. I do not recommend that you go to the store and buy, this is an old broom handle, so a broom handle maybe it's no big deal, but a garden tool, buy one that's painted because the painting covers everything up. If you're looking for a good handle, you want to be able to see, let me pull over here and show you this one. If you want a good handle, you want to be able to see the grain. See the beauty of this grain? Nice, long, all the way along the edge of the handle. And you know that's a good strong handle. If it's painted, you can't see that. So you don't really know what if that handle has a flaw, if there's some kind of weakness. So when you're looking at tools, think about those kind of things. So how do we pick the right tool? That's the next question. So I got a selection of shovels here. So let's say you're in your own garden. Would you pick this shovel to be shoveling in your own garden? No. I actually picked this one because it's a great demo because I can drag it along when I give this presentation, thinking I'd never use it for anything else. But I also do crop surveys, and I get out in alfalfa fields and I'm digging up alfalfa roots. This is the perfect shovel to have in my trunk of my car and be able to dig up an alfalfa root real quick. But no, I wouldn't use it in my garden. If I were digging up plants, I'd want something that's square shaped that I could get down and get a nice straight shovel. If I wanted something that has control, I'd want a handle on it. Some of the things you think about. If you have some issues with, again, ergonomics, a bigger handle where you can get both hands on there, where you can really get a good grip, and this one has a shape to it that's designed for its specific task. So every tool has its own task. Long handle shovel, spade as I often call it, the fact that it has no handle on the top and it's longer, I've been told that you can get 20%, maybe even 25% more use out of it. Because why? Because you can go like this, can't you? You can stretch it out there. You can get longer distance, but if I'm shoveling snow, I'm not looking for long distance. I'm looking for control. If I'm digging up a plant, I don't need that. But if I'm shoveling rocks or something, I might want that long handle. So if you get the point, every shovel, every tool has their place and has their purpose. So let's take a look at some different types of garden hose. I've got a few here. For choosing the right tool, as I said, this was one of the first tools that I put in my own garden, but as I said already, it's not perfect. It doesn't do everything. It does a little bit of everything, but doesn't do perfect of anything. So we have some other tools here that might work better. So if you're in your own garden, let's take a look at, this is my favorite. This is called a shuffle hoe. If you were to look up close, it's got I don't know if I'd call it razor, but it's pretty sharp there. I could cut myself on this edge, and it has an edge here, sharp there as well. It's designed, see how it wiggles? It's designed to shuffle. It's designed to move back and forth. So it's designed to be on the ground and push and pull. You're shuffling, you're weeding both ways. Instead of, Elena, come up here a second. We're going to use a demo here. If I had a garden hoe, she's going to exaggerate for us a bit. That's called a pull hoe. Pull hoe. So if you're hoeing, yeah. Now, if mostly if you're doing that, you're going to go like this, aren't you? You're going to get down into it. So dramatize that a little bit. You're going to, oh, that's a little bit. Look out for Elena. So you see that she's got to get her back into it. This particular hoe, maybe I'm bending over, but I'm just going like this. I'm scraping along the surface, back and forth. And that's another key point. See, that one's going to dig deeper. So when I'm planting my garden, I want to be able to use that to set my rows and so on and so forth. But all I'm doing is getting the little weeds out of my garden. This is all I need. And my sons, when they were your age, were in 4-H and had vegetable garden. and I let them hoe. They handled the sweet corn, and if they weren't careful, the weeds got up this tall. Do you think that's what you want to do? No, no, no. You want to get the weeds when they're that tall. When the weeds are that tall, this is the perfect tool. Now, of course, if you're going to let them get that tall, then that's probably the perfect tool. You get the choice. But I like this one. It sloughs along the top. I like to use this one when the ground is just a little bit dry, just the surface area, so it shuffles along. And that's another good point. This works good in my soil. I've got a lighter, there's some silt in my soil, but it's a high sand concentration, most of what you see in Mauston. You might be in a soil type where this isn't the ideal tool, but that is one tool. Now, if you've got some back issues, this is a tool that's worth considering. This is called a diamond hoe. Shape in the diamond, obvious name, right? Sharp edges, razor sharp on all four sides. Same concept as the shuffle hoe, is it works when you pull it towards you, and it works while you push it away. But the beauty of the diamond hoe is you hang on to the handle, you hold it like so, and then go back and forth like this. And you notice I'm standing straight up. I'm not bending over like Elena was. I'm not bending over even with the shuffle hoe. I am standing straight up. So this hoe is going to be good for people that have back issues. Now, the problem, and I bought this, I thought I would swap out my favorite for this, but I have to admit, and some of you in here probably can relate. See that little point? Boy, that does amazing things until you lose track of it. And then you wipe out your sweet corn roll because you didn't see it there. So I've gone back to this one because I can see the edge. But if you've got back issues, this is a great hole. Called a diamond hole. And I should add, it's a great hole because of the length of the handle. They do make some of these where they've shortened it up. It's cheaper that way. As far as it's hard to send these in the mail. That's a long handle. It costs a lot of money to send it. Don't buy the short one. You want to buy one that's going to be long like this. That's going to allow you to stand while you're doing it. And then, of course, there's other holes. This one's called a Warren hole. I use this once a year because it works great for, again, for planting my potatoes and my sweet corn and making the hills for the pumpkins. Other than that, I don't use it. But some people like, and you notice, I have not sharpened this. It's blunt on all edges. This hole is a good example, just like this hole is a good example. When you buy cheap hoes, they're stamped from metal. There's no edge to them. You have to put an edge to them. If you want a sharp edge, which you do, because it works a lot easier when you've got a sharp edge there. It tills a lot nicer if it's sharp. You need to put that on it. Now, I haven't put this one on it because for planting the garden, I don't need that, although I've been debating just to see how well it works. So that's just a different type of hoe. Now, if you're going to work down on your hands and knees, then you have to convert for things that you can use hands and knees. So, pretty common, 3-tined hoe. I got this from my father-in-law. I haven't yet used it because it's not my favorite. I suppose it works. I'm sure that some people use it. My favorite actually is this one. This is called a Cape Cod weeder. Just a piece of metal, sharpened on that edge. It's got a right-hand turn. It's for right-handed. They sell them for lefties too. You can buy it so it's got the edge turned the other way. Cape Cod weeder. That one you can get down your hands and knees. You can get into all the areas, and you can really get up close and personal, and I have sharpened that edge. So it's easy to work with. And when I don't need it, it goes in my back pocket. Actually, yeah. I've got one here that my father-in-law had for a while, and I think he lost it because it's all rusted up. He must have placed it down on the ground someplace and misplaced it for a while. But nice tool. But just to show you the variety of tools that are out here, here's another one. This is called the Lucko tool. And I'll give some thought about how this was created, because I've stared at this a while and thought, boy, somebody was really ingenious. It's just a wire. And if you're cutting weeds this big in your hands and knees, that's all you need. Just rub that across the surface, and it's going to take those little weeds out. Now, of course, it's not going to take the big weeds out, is it? Just the little guys. But it'd be perfect for getting between your onions or some of the flowers if the conditions are right. So I bought this. I reverted back to my Cape Cod one for my favorite one, but I can see the advantage of this. Now, to challenge you, if you're into invention, if you realize what this really is, I've never asked, but this is what I think. I think somebody pulled out a coat hanger one day, bent it out of shape, put some duct tape on it, and said, wow, this really works neat. And now they're selling it as a tool. Now maybe you can do that someday. Find some ingenious new tool that can be used for an interesting task. It can be done. So there's lots of great tools out there. So let's move on and talk more about maintaining those tools. And before I do that, I just want to point out, when we're working with tools, we want to make sure that we've got gloves, keep our hands from getting hurt. We want to make sure that we've got safety glasses. And we want to make sure that we've secured the tool in a vise, or you can use a C-clamp, or sometimes I'll use the standard wood clamps because it won't damage my tool. So just somehow secure it. I know you could do that sharpening in your hands, and you could do it without the glasses and the gloves, but from a safety standpoint, always be thinking safety first when you're dealing with that. Okay, so I'm going to grab, I'm sure nobody in this room has this issue, but I'm relatively new to prescription glasses. For a long time, I used reading glasses, cheaters. You can buy safety glasses with cheaters on the bottom. So if you don't like using prescription glasses, you can get safety glasses that have that on the bottom. But of course, I'm going to go a different route and put those. They look lovely, don't they? What do you think? Everybody like that? All right, you've got thumbs up over here. Okay, so we got our tool. Let's grab a hole here. First thing we want to do with that tool is we want to clean it up, right? We want to make sure it's clean. So how are we going to do that? Well, here's some tools that we can use to keep it clean. What I typically do in my vegetable garden, I don't have water nearby. If you got water nearby, just a hose, and you spray it off and keep it clean. Matter of fact, if you don't keep it clean, the dirt can build up. I was looking for a hole I had that rusted on me. I mistakenly didn't get that dirt cleaned off, and it got rusty. If you leave the dirt on it, the moisture absorbs into that soil, and it can rust over time. So some people think, well, it's not good for the hole to get wet. There's nothing wrong with getting it wet. So this is a bucket of water. I keep a bucket of water in my garage because I don't have water nearby, and I keep a nylon brush nearby, and if I can't get it off with just dunking it, I will simply brush it off with the brush. Simple as that. Tools clean. And of course, I'll keep a rag around to wipe it off, and my tool is all clean to go and hang it up on the shelf. I do that after every time I use it. Simple task. And I try and keep it easy, because if it isn't easy, I won't do it. I bet you wouldn't either. So that's part of the process. Now I've got some other things here. You say, what else can I use to get my tools clean? Well, you could have an old spatula around, and you could scrape it off. That would work. You could use steel wool. You could take that steel wool and scrape off if there's some rust spots on there. You could use that steel wool to scrape it off. What I've gone to and found quite useful is this product. If you've never seen this, this is called pumice. Lump pumice is the full name. You see by the picture, it's used commonly, you can find it in the hardware store, used to clean porcelain toilets. So if you've done some damage to your porcelain toilets, you'll want one of these things. So if you can use this to take the corrosion off the porcelain toilet, you can use it to clean the rust off of your tools. You read the directions. All it says is to dunk your tool in there, or run it over water, and just run that pumice stone over the top of it. It makes a lather. We won't do a lot of it today, but it makes a lather. Actually, you see that? It's lathering up that rusty spot right there. And it takes it off. You get it to where you want it, and you see it's taken some of the rust right off the side there already. And I haven't worked with it that much, but certainly I've got some rust on that particular hole. Lump pumice stone, that's one way to do it. Now I got a couple other things here that I don't prefer to use, but I want to point them out. You could use a wire brush, you could use a putty knife. I do not prefer these, because if I'm using this putty knife on my tool and I'm scraping, I can easily scratch that surface. And if I scratch that surface, I've created a spot that can rust. So not ideally, I don't see those as ideal use for that. Now, I see I've got some rubbing alcohol here. You're in the landscape class. Have we talked about why you might use rubbing alcohol on tools? It's not to keep it clean. It's to keep the plants, it's to keep the diseases that are on the plants from spreading from plant to plant. So, if you're working with, let's say, your roses or your apple trees or some other landscaping plant, and you're worried about spreading a disease to disease, a little rubbing alcohol wouldn't be a hole you'd do it on. It'd be a pruner, wouldn't it? If you're pruning, you'd be wiping them down every so often to sterilize them to make sure that you're not spreading that disease if the plant has disease issues. So keep that in mind. Now once you're done getting it clean, what's to stop it from rusting? You've got to put something on it, don't you? Some kind of a rust inhibitor. The most logical thing is to squirt some oil on there. So if we just squirted some oil on there and we wiped it down, it would be coated and it would work just fine. We'd be preventing the rust from occurring. My preference is I keep an old peanut butter container around. I cut a hole in the lid. I put an old foam brush in there with a hole in the top. So I have a nail in the garage with that. So this has a little oil on it. When I need to do it, and I'll have to dampen it off so it doesn't get too bad, I just paint my tool, just like so. There we go. All oiled up, done to go, put it all away, we're good to go. Again, I'm about doing this quickly, so I do it. You could wipe it down. I rarely do when it's in my own, because I will do this quickly. I don't want to have to monkey with that, but we could wipe that down. So that, you oil that up, you're preventing oxygen from getting on that, and you're preventing rust. Now I got a whole bunch of other examples of what else could you use. You could be really creative. You could use things like car wax, just wax the tool up. You could use WD-40, you could spray it on there. Now I will tell you that the WD-40 is a thin oil, so it's not going to last as long. This is just motor oil, something I have sitting around with for my small engines. It's going to last longer. You could use grease, or this is just Vaseline, right? You could just put some Vaseline on there, and that's going to keep it from going. You could use, that's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be over there, but anyway, you could use silicone spray. And if you choose not to do the petroleum products, there's no reason you can't use some type of vegetable oil. Extra virgin olive oil is what I got right here. Just something that you can put on that tool to keep it from rusting. All of those things will work. Just do something to keep it from rusting. Okay? Now let's talk about handles for a little bit. What are we going to do with our handles? You first want to make sure that the tool is secure. So if this were to come loose, I would drill a hole through there, I'd put a screw in there, and I'd get it good and tight. At this particular handle, it started to look a little bit peaked, so I sanded it down. I took some standard sandpaper, I sanded that handle down good and smooth, and then I used boiled linseed oil, mixed it with a little, follow the directions, mixed it with a little mineral spirits. Linseed oil it just covers the surface, and once it dries, it creates a nice firm layer. Now if you're looking at it close, I think it really brought out the grain in this particular hole. Actually, these two holes I bought at the exact same time, exact same store. See the difference? Just by treating them. So, and the old one that's not treated, I chose not to do it, but the other one I did. So do you have to do it? No, but it might prevent some splinters. It might keep your hands a little less blistery. But that's another way you can do that. I should mention though, boiled linseed oil, there's other ways to do it too. At this point, if you're happy with your hole, you could paint it yourself. You could just put some paint on it. You could put some rubber coating. But I should point out boiled linseed oil, make sure you read the directions. It says, waste soaked with boiled linseed oil may spontaneously catch fire if improperly discarded. So we don't want the shop burning down because you left those out. Material boiled means it's got some products in it that cause it to dry faster. If you just put regular linseed oil on there, it takes 6 to 9 months for it to totally dry. If you've got that kind of time, put regular linseed oil there and park it in the shed and don't use it for a while. Okay, so that's maintaining the tools. So let's talk about sharpening. Got some things back here from a sharpening standpoint I want to show you. If we're talking garden tools, everything we've talked about, this is all you really need. All you need is what's called a mill file. This is a 10-inch mill file. This does most of the sharpening tasks that need to be done with our garden tools. You could up it. And by the way, they sell card files that you can use to clean those off between use if you like. You can also use a wire brush that will do the same thing to clean those off. If you notice, I'm going at a slant. If you were up close, you'd see that the file is diagonal across. The grooves are diagonal across. You use that file that way. But you know, you could also use sandpaper. This is 320 waterproof sandpaper. I use it often on a board. I just put a board on, duct tapes. That's actually, duct tape. I've duct taped some onto a board so I can use it, and you'll see it later how we can use that. Now, if you're into more fine tuning, the sharpening I don't do just with my garden tools. I do with my hunting equipment. I do with other things like that. So then you can go to the next level. Sharpening tools used to be often done with what was called a whetstone. And a whetstone, you used oil. You put the oil on there and you ran your tool. Let's find something small that's easy to demo. You ran your tool across here to sharpen it with oil on it. Just slid it across there and that sharpened. You can still use a whetstone. You can still find them out there. They still work. I have gone to what's called a diamond stone. These are all examples of diamond stones, different variations. So it's little bits of diamond that have been glued to steel. And this is extra fine. Let me pass that around. If you've never seen a diamond stone, that will actually file or hone or sharpen things. This is a little coarser. Same thing. And the reason I like the diamond stones is because you wash them off with water. They don't have to be used wet. They could be used wet, but when you're done, you just wash them off, rinse them off with water, and you're good to go. Another form of the diamond stone. These two, same thing. This pencil stick. I never remember the name of this, but it's the same idea, same concept. You got a little wheel. I like the flat edge. You use that to sharpen too. And this one in my left hand is a relatively new tool of mine, which I think I'm going to fall in love with real quickly. Same thing, diamond stone, just there. Now you might say, well, why do I need these? Well, if you're sharpening a pruner, the right way to sharpen a pruner is actually to disassemble it into its two pieces and put it into a vise and then sharpen it. But I don't know about you, I don't have the time for that. I'd rather just do it when it's in one piece. So these tools in my hand will easily fit along that edge and can be used to sharpen. Let's pass that around too. People might want to look at those. So that's where those tools come in handy. The mini hone, I think, is what that orange one is called. So those are different sharpening tools that can be used. So let's go back to actual sharpening, or let's move on to actual sharpening. I keep moving my hole around. Here it is. When I first got the hoe, I put an edge on it, so I did have to put it on the grinder, put that edge on it. So how are we going to sharpen that? We're going to put it in a vise. We're going to put it in a vise, secure that vise. We're going to use our mill file. Now the mill file only cuts in one direction. It only cuts in the forward direction, this way. So if we're sharpening, we could go like this, one hand, I could go like that. I could sharpen like this and get it sharp. Put a little more energy into it, we could. But we don't want to go both ways. So we're going to go like so. Now you notice what I did. Preferred way for garden tools in particular is two hands. Take two hands and I'm going to run that across there. And the preferred way that I prefer is to go diagonal like so. So we're going to start at one end. Well, I'm pushing with my right hand. I'm pushing it up like so. And getting that sharp edge. You get the point. Now, when I do this, let me do it a little bit more. Matter of fact, let's stop a second. Here's a trick. I wouldn't do it in a garden hoe, probably not necessary in a garden hoe, but if I take a Sharpie marker and I put some lines on here, guess what? I'm going to know where I sharpened. I'm going to know the angle that I'm sharpening at because I'm going to see it come off on that line. Now, if you like to sharpen knives or pruners a lot, this would be more advantageous to use that type of approach. But I can see as I'm doing it, it's coming off, and how it's coming off, and the angle that I'm taking it off on. So we just keep that going. In this case, I think we're doing okay. There we go. I got a nice straight edge to that hole. If you pull this off of here, if you noticed, I was filing this way. When I do that, you leave what's called a burr. You scrape the metal across, you leave some metal over here, a little bit of a burr. Now on a garden tool like this, just leave it if you want to. If it's a hunting knife, if it's pruners, you need to get rid of that burr. So always want to think about that burr being there. So the way to do that, two ways I do it, is I simply take the file and I run it across here. So I take the file and I run it across there, just lightly. And it gets rid of the burr. So she's gone. But you could also take the sandpaper and do circular motion to get that off of there too. Either way, that's going to make this tool that much sharper. People have asked me sometimes, how often do you sharpen your tool? How often do you think? How often should you sharpen your tool? Every 3 months. That's about how often I sharpen mine. I'll give you honesty. That's pretty good. If you're a commercial vegetable gardener, they'll carry something like this in their back pocket and they'll do it every 20 minutes. So every time you sharpen, and so you could do it as often as 20 minutes or as often as 3 months, but it's up to you about that. Here's a side story. Are you familiar with the fishtail tool? It's simply used to poke and push out dandelions, or in my case I use it for the bull thistles growing up in my side land. You keep that sharp, it's amazing how better it works. So any of these tools, you keep it sharp, it's amazing how this breaks down the dandelion. So I brought it out now because, when I was after those bull thistles, I took the file with and I ran that file through there every so often out there because I wanted that sharp, because I wanted to make sure I got those bull thistles. But it sure made life a little easier to keep it sharp. So always keep those tools sharp. So that's the hole. Let's move on. Oh, one point I should mention is the angle. How sharp is too sharp? Let's look at it that way. You want this to be as sharp as possible without it nicking and breaking or gouging. So if you're working at a shovel and you're working with stones, you certainly don't want a sharp shovel because it's just going to nick as you're working with it. So if it's too sharp, you'll know because it'll start wearing prematurely. But if it's not sharp at all, it's not going to be fun to work with. So keep that tool sharp. So let's sharpen something else here. You brought in from your class a head shears. Oh, you know what? We're going to come back to the head shears. I want to talk about the shovel first. So you saw with the here's my little demo shovel. Easy to put in the vise, easy to clamp down. You saw with the hole, I was going one way. Well, a shovel like this comes to an end, doesn't it? So to sharpen this one, it's the same approach, but you're going to stop right there. So you're going to go forward, like we're doing, like so, till we get to the end. Then we're going to spin it around and sharpen the other side the same way. So we keep running that across there until we get it where we want it. Now I should mention something. If you look at this one versus this one, I've sharpened this one on the inside. See that? Inside of the shovel. I've sharpened that one on the outside of the shovel. Think it makes a difference? Some people say it does. Some people say that the inside is better. So I've gone to sharpening on the inside, so that would be my recommendation, is sharpening. But I started to do it on the outside because if you use a power grinder or a bench grinder to set that original edge, you're going to have to do it on the outside because you can't get it on the inside. The only way you can get the inside edge is do it with a file. So that may change how you do what you do. So you get that technique, just run that file across, just to repeat, just run that file across to this end. And then of course over here, you do the same thing. Switch it out, run it across till you get to the end. And of course you could also go from this way there. Now, something I just did, it's something worth pointing out. So far everything I've done is gone outward like this. And I've created the burr on the back side. If you don't like to deal with that burr, you can go into this. You can go in like this. When you go in, you scrape the metal this way. And then then the burr shows up here and it really doesn't matter. If you're using, I'm going to go back to a hunting knife or kitchen knife. If you're sharpening a kitchen knife, that's the ideal way to do it, is to not deal with the burr. You go in, you scrape it in. Scrape it in and eliminate that burr. But I could cut myself doing it, couldn't I? So I'm not going to do that for fear I might cut myself. But that's another way that it could be done. So let's go to the head shears. It was a sample brought in. Maybe I can get one of you to take this one apart. This is one of your head shears. Let's talk about how we sharpen that. You know what? I'll give that to Elena. You can work on that. There's no rush. We'll get to it later. I have one that's already apart. Head shears, it's easier to take it apart. If you look at that one, there's a cutting edge here. You want to just follow the sharpening that's there. This one actually has two cutting edges, one there and one here. On this side, it's just flat. And it's got the serrated edges. If this is together, Elena, is it still together? No. Nope. Oh well. I wanted to point something out. It was too late. You know what the biggest problem with head shears are? And that one had that problem. That's why I pulled it out. They're supposed to go like this, right? If you use these incorrectly or over time, this bends. And if they both bend, and you've got it together and you look at it, let's get it right. You got it closed, and if you look at it, you'd see through it because it would be bent. That's most commonly what happens with head shears and why they don't work right. So what you need to do is put it in the vise and twist and turn and bend it till it's flat. Put it down on something flat and make sure that it's flat and it's square. And once that happens, then everything else is just about following that edge. Following that edge. Doing exactly what we just did with the hoe and the shovel and taking that file and running it across there. That one there in particular first needs a little bit of the pumice stone, needs a little bit of probably some mineral spirits or something else to clean it up. So I got it. And this one of course comes apart a little bit differently. So this one you can work with a lot easier. So see, this one's going to need a little cleaning. All that needs to come off. You do not sharpen the serrated part. Clean it up good with this one you might want to use a wire brush on. Start with the nylon, but clean that up. Okay. Now, I think I've covered what I wanted to cover for the group. Is there any questions?